Okay, now on to part two of my strengths and weaknesses of various Christmas Carol adaptations. I've got three more that I want to talk to you about. The first of the three is the 1970 musical starring Albert Finney as Scrooge. And this one, I guess you could call it a strength, although it is one of the reasons that I have affection for it. This is actually the first version of A Christmas Carol on screen that I ever saw. This was my introduction to This was my introduction to Dickens' story when I was around 6 or 7. It was made in 1970, aired a lot on television when I was growing up because I was born in 1969. So this was what I saw the first several Christmases that I had a decent memory. And it scared the bejeebers out of me, which really all good Christmas Carol adaptations ought to do. So I got a soft spot for it. And it does have what for me are strengths. I like musicals, so I like the songs. There's one in particular that was nominated for the Best Song Oscar, and it's sung by a character who isn't in the novel. He is one of Scrooge's debtors, and after Scrooge has died, he launches into a song of merriment in which all of Scrooge's other debtors join, and it becomes just a big party celebrating the fact that the big bad wolf is dead, called Thank You Very Much. And there's also a wonderfully misanthropic song that Scrooge himself sings called I Hate People. And I've heard that around Christmas time, a lot of retail workers have this as a kind of anthem that they like to trot out. And it's understandable. Now, the songs are, at least to me, I know they're not necessarily as good as Rodgers and Hammerstein or Lerner and Lowe, but they are a lot of fun. I also really like Finney's Scrooge because he was actually a young man when he made this movie, and he plays his younger self. And he manages to age up effectively. And this does have a number of good supporting performances. Kenneth More makes a rather delightful Ghost of Christmas Present, who also gets one of the catchier songs in the movie, I Like Life. And you also have Dame Edith Evans as the Ghost of Christmas Past. You have Lawrence Naismith playing Old Fezziwig. Just as the movie goes on, you get a lot of British character actors dotted throughout the cast. And of course, there is a rather unusual performance by Alec Guinness as the ghost of Jacob Marley. I can't really describe his performance, you just have to kind of see it for yourself. But it is a lot of fun if you just like to play the game of spot the character actor, which I always find fun. Now, as far as weaknesses are concerned, some people might not care for the songs. I know Pauline Kael gave the movie an awful review back when it came out. Granted, I don't always agree with everything Pauline Kael says, but if you're not fond of musicals, you might want to skip this one. There is a little bit of over sentimentality, you might say, regarding the Cratchit family that maybe there's that thin line between sentiment and sentimentality that you have to be very careful as you walk. And this may slip over into the treacly side a little bit. So those are some weaknesses. My favorite version is the one I'm going to talk to you about next. And it is the 1984. Yeah, they didn't actually have a good big screen or feature length Christmas Carol adaptation in the 1940s. Okay. Anyway, slip of the tongue. But 1984 made for TV film released on television in the December 1984, and starring George C. Scott. Now, normally I would consider it a terrible idea to cast an American actor in such an iconically British role. But somehow Scott gets away with it. He gives this amazingly tough, he is perhaps the toughest nut to crack of all of them. The other Scrooges are very good, but they have, at least to my eyes, a touch more vulnerability, even early on. Whereas George C. Scott, well, physically, of course, Scott is a huge man and broad shouldered, very, very tough looking. So he uses that physicality to his advantage to bring Scrooge to life. And this is the version that I usually show to students when I'm teaching them about Dickens' story. And as I watched him again this past year, I really started to get the idea that, at least as he's playing the role, why is money so important to Scrooge? A lot of it has to do with control. This is somebody who wants to be in complete control of every situation that he encounters. And he will fight to keep that control, even in circumstances that would send a lot of people over the edge. So that's a huge part of his powerhouse performances, his determination to stay in control, to keep control at all costs. And it makes him a tougher nut to crack. Although, as we follow him on his journey, we see little bits, subtle bits here and there that show that he is being affected. He's not as obviously affected as, say, Reginald Owen is. But if you keep an eye on the brushstrokes, you'll see how strong this performance really is. And he doesn't attempt the British accent, but he just embodies Scrooge so much that you honestly don't care. He's also surrounded by my favorite supporting cast. You've got David Warner playing Bob Cratchit and making the most of one of his opportunities to play a completely sympathetic character, because he was usually cast as villains. And he's a great actor. Roger Rees plays Scrooge's nephew Fred and does a very good job at embodying that spirit of Christmas that I talked about in my first video a couple of days ago. Frank Finlay is perhaps the scariest Jacob Marley's ghost that I have seen. Just the way he undoes his kerchief and his jaw flops like that. That creeped me out. I was a little older, of course, when I first saw this version, but that creeped me out. Nigel Davenport shows up in a very small role, but he makes a big impact. He plays Scrooge's father. And this is somebody you don't actually see in the novella, but you know about him. And actually showing him and seeing that relationship between him and Ebenezer makes you sympathize all the more with the hell Scrooge was caught in as a boy and a young man growing up. It's also tremendously faithful to the source material. You do get ignorance and want. You get all the steps on the journey except for one thing, and this you could call a weakness. There are certain things in the novel that the movie doesn't do, and because it is so faithful, it kind of stands out. Oh, why didn't you see the ghost of Christmas present age over the day? And why didn't you see them visit the miners' hole and also the lighthouse where Christmas is being celebrated? What happened to those bits? Well, they're not there. Certain things did have to be cut out. But there is a sequence that is added where Scrooge observes a homeless family trying to have something resembling Christmas as they cook two potatoes over a fire. And that helps maybe rescue the movie from that criticism a little bit, because you see the working poor, and then you see the middle class, the upper middle class, as embodied by Fred and his party, and then you see the homeless. So the Ghost of Christmas Present takes Scrooge to visit these three different families from different rungs on the social ladder at the time. The score is not my favorite. It's a little intrusive at times. I wish it had been a little bit more subtle. It seems to be playing up the 19th century melodrama aspect of the story. That's really the only main weakness I can find with it. But it's a very well filmed, beautifully realized, well acted. Oh, I forgot to mention my favorite supporting performance, Edward Woodward, who plays the Ghost of Christmas Present, and he is kick butt. You'll have to watch it to believe it. It is available here on YouTube, and I think the 1951 version with Alastair Sim is also available here on YouTube. For the next one, you have to subscribe to Disney Plus, and that is 1992's The Muppet Christmas Carol. Now, I saw this in the theaters back when it came out, and I know this is heresy, particularly speaking as a Muppet fan, but I didn't care as much for it. And this past year, I watched it again, and now I can understand a little bit, first of all, why it's beloved, and second, why I may not have cared for it. Let me tell you about the strength in capital letters that this movie has. This has charm galore. If you're looking for charm, this adaptation has you covered. The songs are charming, the cast of Muppets is charming, and you really have fun, again, if you're a Muppet fan, spotting the different Muppets that you meet in the various supporting roles as you journey through this particular take on Victorian London. The great Gonzo dons a top hat to transform himself into the narrator, Charles Dickens. He is delightful. And Rizzo the Rat is his sidekick. He is their interplay, their banter is also delightful. Michael Caine does a good job as Scrooge. He makes a decent Scrooge. The weaknesses of this film have everything to do with the fact that this movie has a particular target audience. It was made for younger audiences, and as a result, the darker elements of the story get sanded away. We do get Belle in this version, but now we don't get Fan, so we do not see the tragedy Scrooge experiences early on when he loses his sister. So we're not really given any reason why Scrooge would have such a negative attitude toward his nephew, whereas earlier versions tend to make that a little bit clearer. And without those, the Ghost of Christmas Future, I do have to say, yes, he is scary. He is as scary as he's meant to be. But I really wish they'd been able to include Fan, that they'd been able to include a little bit more of the tragedy of Scrooge's younger life. I understand there was no way they were going to be able to work ignorance and want into this version. It simply was not going to happen. But I think that's why I didn't respond to it as well when I saw it for the first time. That I missed those darker elements. I missed that aspect of tragedy. But it wouldn't have really fit in with what this version was trying to do. So I'm cutting it a little bit more slack, and it is really a very charming film. So that's all I've got for you. I'll be back with another video talking about some of my favorite Christmas movies in general. See you then.